My name is Monica Johnson, and at 52 years old, I have learned that storms rarely come alone. They roll in with thunder in the sky, yes, but also with thunder in the heart. The night it all began, the rain came hard and fast, the kind that makes the streetlights blur and the sidewalks look like rivers. I remember clutching my coat tighter as I left the hospital, the clock striking close to midnight. For nearly 20 years, I had worked those graveyard shifts as a nurse, checking vitals, soothing frightened patients, keeping watch while the rest of the city slept. Night after night, it was me and the beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic, and the silent prayers I whispered for strangers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And honest work had kept food on my table since the day Daniel, my husband, died. He was 39 when the scaffolding collapsed at that construction site, leaving me alone with 2 children who still needed more from life than I could possibly give. I can still see his lunchbox sitting on the counter that day, waiting for hands that never came home. From then on, I became both mother and father, both comforter and disciplinarian. My son Ethan was 9 then, my daughter Kayla just 4. They are 24 and 19 now, but in many ways I still carry them like toddlers on my hip. That's what motherhood does, you hold them long after they can stand on their own. So there I was, stepping out into that downpour, shoes squeaking, hair plastered to my cheeks, thinking only about the bills that never stopped coming. Kayla's tuition, Ethan's rent, the groceries, the light bill, the old car that coughed like a smoker every time I turned the key. It was a tired sort of rhythm, but it was mine. That's when he stopped me. "Monica," the voice barked behind me. "Mr. Carlton, the new night supervisor." His tie was always too tight, like he wanted the world to know he had authority. He had been picking at me for weeks. My charting wasn't fast enough, my breaks were too long, my tone too soft with patience. Tonight he had found his chance. "We need to talk," he said, tugging me back into the fluorescent hallway. Inside, the rain sounded muffled, like applause behind thick curtains. Carlton held a folder in his hands. He didn't even look me in the eye. "You've been insubordinate," he began. "You question my orders in front of staff. You refused to move a patient without clearance. I refused because the patient was unstable." I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "You wanted me to transfer her without the cardiologist's approval. That could have killed her." His lips thinned into a line. "This isn't about what you think, Monica. This is about following the chain of command." And then, just like that, he slid the paper across the counter, termination notice, effective immediately. I felt my chest collapse inward. 20 years. 20 years of broken backs and swollen ankles, of missing Christmas mornings and birthdays because patients needed me, and it all ended with a piece of paper and a man who never once held a dying hand in his own. I wanted to scream. Instead, I folded the paper neatly, like it was a grocery receipt, and placed it into my purse. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You'll regret this," I whispered. Not because I planned revenge, but because I knew the cost of compassion, and he didn't. When I stepped back outside, the rain greeted me like an old, cold friend. I walked the 8 blocks home, my umbrella flipping uselessly in the wind, my shoes soaking through. With each step, the weight grew heavier. Ethan had already been looking for work for months without luck. Kayla's tuition bill sat on the counter, unopened, because I couldn't bear to face the number. And now, this. By the time I reached our apartment, I was drenched clear through. I stood at the door, staring at the peeling paint, and wondered how many storms one woman was meant to endure. Inside, the air was warm with the smell of spaghetti sauce. Kayla's laugh floated from the kitchen, her voice young and bright. Ethan was slouched on the couch, scrolling on his phone, pretending not to worry. For a moment, I let myself just listen, storing the sound like a candle against the dark. They didn't know yet. I hung my coat by the door, smoothed my wet hair, and practiced a smile. Because that's what mothers do. We carry the thunder, and we let the children believe the rain is just a lullaby. But deep down, I knew this storm was different. This wasn't just a lost job. This was the night everything would change. Morning came too soon. I hadn't slept, not really. I spent most of the night listening to the radiator hiss and the rain taper into silence, staring at the ceiling as though the plaster might whisper answers. Instead, all I heard was the restless turning of my own thoughts: bills, tuition, rent, groceries, and the hollow space where my job used to be. By the time the sun forced its way through our blinds, I had put on my strongest mask. That's another thing mothers learn: we become actresses in our own homes. My children didn't need to see my panic. They carried enough of their own. Ethan was the first to shuffle out of his room, 24 years old but with the heavy shoulders of someone older. His hair was unkempt, his t-shirt wrinkled. He glanced at me over a bowl of cereal, his phone already in his hand. "Morning," he muttered. "Morning," I answered, pouring myself coffee I didn't want. I studied him when he wasn't looking. He'd been job hunting for months since the warehouse cut back shifts. Sometimes I caught him scrolling aimlessly through listings, sometimes through basketball highlights instead. I knew the shame that lived behind his silence. Men want to provide, and when they can't, the weight can twist them into shadows of themselves. Kayla came bouncing out next, still wrapped in the bubble of her 19 years. She had her college hoodie on, earbuds dangling, a stack of books pressed to her chest. She kissed my cheek without looking, the way busy daughters do. "Mom, don't forget the tuition deadline is next Friday," she said, already fishing in the fridge for a yogurt. Her words hit me like a stone. Tuition. I felt the letter waiting on the counter behind me, unopened. "I know," I said softly. I thought I said it soft enough, but Ethan caught it. His head jerked up from his phone. "Know what, Mom?" I hesitated, then tried to steer the ship. "Nothing, just making sure everything's on track." But my son had always been sharp-eyed. He set down his spoon, leaning forward. "You look different. What happened last night?" Kayla pulled her earbuds free, glancing between us. I forced a smile. "Nothing happened, I just didn't sleep well." Ethan wasn't buying it. "You're lying." His voice carried a hard edge, one that surprised even him. Kayla frowned. "Don't talk to Mom like that." But Ethan stood, pushing his chair back. "I know that face. That's the face you made when Dad died. That's the face you made when we almost lost the apartment. What is it this time?" My throat tightened. I wanted to tell them gently, with patience, like a parent explaining the news of a storm to a child, but the words tumbled out raw. "I lost my job." The kitchen went silent. Kayla froze with the yogurt in her hand. Ethan blinked like I had just spoken a foreign language. "What do you mean?" he demanded. I whispered. "They let me go." Effective immediately. Kayla's mouth fell open. "But Mom, what about my classes?" The words pierced deeper than she knew. Not cruel, just frightened, but fear has a way of sounding selfish. Ethan's fists clenched. "So what? We're supposed to just what? Sit around and watch everything crumble." "Ethan?" "No," he cut me off, his voice cracking under years of frustration. "You've been killing yourself for us for decades. You missed holidays. You never bought yourself new clothes. You worked nights until your body gave out. And for what? Look at us. I'm a loser who can't land a job. Kayla's drowning in debt. And you," he pointed at me, his eyes burning. "You just keep sacrificing like some saint, like it means something. But it doesn't. None of it matters." Kayla gasped. "Don't say that." But the damage was done. His words sliced through me, sharper than Carlton's notice. I had built my whole life on the belief that my sacrifices would bloom into something better for them. And here was my son, telling me it was meaningless. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Ethan," I said quietly, "don't ever think your life doesn't matter to me. Don't ever think that." But he shook his head, tears stinging his eyes, and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Kayla's eyes brimmed with tears, too. She came to me, resting her head on my shoulder like she hadn't done since she was little. "Mom, I'm sorry, he didn't mean it." I stroked her hair, staring at the door. "I know," I murmured, "but sometimes people mean the things they are most afraid to say." We stood there in silence, the sound of Ethan's anger still echoing through the thin apartment walls. The cracks in our family weren't new. They had been spidering for years, spreading quietly across the plaster. But that morning, after the storm, after the job, after the slammed door, I knew those cracks were threatening to bring the whole house down. I didn't go after Ethan. Some battles you chase, some you let breathe. He needed space, and truth be told, so did I. When the walls close in at home, sometimes the only choice is to step out into the open air, even if the air cuts cold against your skin. That evening, I wrapped my scarf around my neck and walked the long way back from the grocery store. I had only bought bread and milk. My wallet couldn't bear more, but the bags felt heavier than gold. Each block carried the weight of memories. Daniel teaching Ethan to ride his bike, Kayla drawing hopscotch squares in pastel chalk, neighbors who had moved away when the rent climbed too high. It was on that cracked stretch of Main Street under a flickering streetlight that I saw him. A man, silver-haired, tall even as he slumped against the brick wall, clutched his chest with one hand, his face pale as chalk. His other hand fumbled for a phone, but it slipped from his grasp and skittered across the wet sidewalk. I dropped my bags without thinking. Instinct took over, the same instinct that had guided me through countless midnight emergencies. "Sir, can you hear me?" I pressed my hand against his wrist, searching for a pulse. His eyes fluttered, panicked but conscious. "Breathe slow," I told him, my voice steady though my heart hammered. "You're not alone. I've got you." His breath came ragged, wheezing like a broken accordion. I loosened his collar, tilted his chin slightly. "I'm calling an ambulance," I said, grabbing his phone from the ground. But he shook his head, clutching my sleeve with surprising strength. "No, not yet," he rasped. "Just give me a minute." There was something in his tone, part pride, part desperation, that made me pause. I knew that look. I had seen it in proud men who refused wheelchairs, in fathers who refused to let their children see their weakness. "Then sit," I said firmly, guiding him down until he rested against the wall. "Minute or not, you need air." We stayed there in the drizzle, my coat shielding him from the worst of the wind. Slowly, the color returned to his cheeks. His breathing evened, the tremor in his hands eased. Finally, he opened his eyes fully. They were a striking blue, the kind that seemed to hold the sky even under a broken streetlight. "You're a nurse?" he asked, his voice low but steadier now. "I was," I admitted, "until last night." He studied me, as though trying to read the whole story in my face. Then he offered a hand, shaky but deliberate. "Richard Coleman," he said. I hesitated before shaking it. His palm was cool, but the grip strong enough to carry authority. "Monica Johnson," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Well, Monica Johnson, you may have just saved me tonight." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say I'd done what anyone would do, but the truth was, not everyone would stop. The sidewalks are full of people who look away, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt a strange pull in that moment, like I had stumbled into someone else's storm, just as mine was swelling. We sat there a while longer, the rain easing to a mist around us. He told me he was 60, that stress and long hours were catching up with him. He owned several properties downtown, though they feel more like prisons than palaces, he joked. I didn't press. He didn't ask about the tired lines in my own face or the damp grocery bags at my side. Instead, we spoke the way strangers sometimes do when they sense a tether forming, carefully, like each word might tie a knot. By the time Richard stood, steadier on his feet, the night had quieted. He placed a hand over his heart, then over mine. "You didn't have to stop," he said. "Maybe not," I replied. "But sometimes stopping is the only thing worth doing." His eyes softened. "Then allow me to repay you someday." I shook my head, bending to pick up my bags. Repayment isn't necessary. Just take care of yourself. But as I walked away, I felt his gaze following me, a warmth cutting through the chill. I didn't know then that our paths would cross again, or how deeply. All I knew was that on a night when everything in my world was breaking, I had stumbled upon a man whose walls, too, were beginning to crack. And maybe, just maybe, that was no accident. The days after that night blurred together, heavy and gray. Losing the job was like losing oxygen. You can live a little while holding your breath, but eventually the body starts to panic. Every morning I woke with the same dread, staring at the alarm clock as if it had betrayed me. No scrubs to put on, no shift to prepare for. Just silence, and the bills piled on the counter like vultures waiting their turn. Ethan was still avoiding me, slipping out early and coming home late, carrying the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. Kayla tried to fill the space with chatter about classes, professors, her friends' drama, but beneath her bright voice, I could hear the tremor of worry. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of applications for hospitals that wouldn't call me back, the phone rang. "Mrs. Johnson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Angela from Mercy General. We received your application, and I wanted to invite you in for an interview. Tomorrow, if possible." I nearly dropped the receiver. I hadn't even sent one to Mercy General yet. I'm sorry, did you say Mercy General? Yes, your name came highly recommended. We'd love to meet you. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Someone had put my name in a place I hadn't even knocked, and in my gut, I knew who. The next day, I stepped into the lobby of Mercy General, a gleaming, modern place, far from the crumbling walls of my old ward. The receptionist greeted me warmly. The interview was professional, almost too smooth. They spoke of my years of experience, my reputation with patients, my reliability. They offered me a position before I'd even walked out the door. That evening, as I walked home with the letter of offer folded neatly in my purse, I saw him again. Richard stood outside a coffee shop on the corner, leaning on a cane but dressed in a sharp gray coat. He noticed me before I could duck away. "Monica," he called, his voice steady. I crossed the street, clutching my bag tighter. "So it was you." He smiled, almost sheepishly. "Mercy General needed good people. I told them they'd be lucky to have you." I wanted to thank him, I did, but the words tangled in my throat. Pride is a stubborn thing. It fights even when the heart knows better. "You didn't have to," I said finally. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But sometimes we're put in each other's path for a reason. You saved me that night. Let me return the favor." I searched his face, trying to gauge whether this was charity, pity, or something else entirely. But his eyes were calm, without calculation. Still, the unease bubbled up in me. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Coleman." His smile didn't falter. "I don't see you that way. I see someone who deserves a chance, and I happen to be in a position to open a door or two." For a moment, we stood in the glow of the streetlight, two weary souls balancing gratitude and pride. Then he added softly, "My late wife used to say that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people help you." The mention of his wife caught me off guard. A shadow flickered across his face, the kind that only grief leaves behind. It softened something inside me. I exhaled slowly. "Thank you, truly." He tipped his head, as if sealing an unspoken agreement, then excused himself with a gentleman's nod and disappeared into the night. I walked home lighter, the cold air biting but no longer unbearable. The next week, when Kayla opened her university account, she found her tuition had been mysteriously credited in full. She came running into the kitchen, her eyes wide. "Mom, you paid it. How?" I froze, my hand still wet from the sink. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even dared open that envelope yet. "Must have been a scholarship adjustment," I said, feigning ignorance. She squealed and hugged me, relief flooding her face. But as I held her, my mind turned to Richard again. He was weaving threads into our lives quietly, almost invisibly. And while part of me wanted to resist, another part whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of grace you don't turn away. That night, as I watched the two of them, Ethan on the couch, Kayla at the table, laughter rising between them, I let myself believe that the storm clouds might be thinning. What I didn't know then was that every hand that reaches out comes with its own shadow. And sometimes, help, no matter how kind, can stir resentments that were waiting like cracks in the walls, ready to split open. For a little while, life began to feel breathable again. The steady rhythm of a new hospital, the soft relief of Kayla's tuition being covered, even Ethan spending a few more evenings at home instead of disappearing into the city, all of it wrapped around me like a quilt stitched together by someone unseen. And I knew whose hands had guided the needle. Richard called once, just once, to check how I was settling into Mercy General. His voice was polite, distant almost, as though he didn't want to intrude. We kept the conversation brief, yet even that short call lingered with me afterward. I hadn't told Ethan or Kayla about him, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew how it would look. A wealthy, older man suddenly dropping into our lives with gifts disguised as opportunities. I could already hear Ethan's accusations, Kayla's cautious questions. So when the knock came on my door the following Sunday, I wasn't prepared. I opened it to find a woman standing there, tall, slim, her hair swept into a sleek bun that said she never had to run for a bus in her life. She wore a coat that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Her eyes were sharp, too sharp, as though scanning for cracks in the paint of our small apartment. "Mrs. Johnson?" she asked, though she already knew. "Yes, I'm Samantha Coleman, Richard's daughter." The way she said it carried a warning, as though the name alone should place me in my place. I stepped back, gesturing politely. "Would you like to come in?" She glanced past me into the apartment, her lip curling almost imperceptibly at the worn furniture, the carpet that had seen better years. "No, thank you, this won't take long." I braced myself. "My father has mentioned you," she began, folding her leather gloves between her fingers. "He seems to think you're some sort of guardian angel who appeared on a rainy night, but I know what this looks like." My chest tightened. "And what does it look like to you?" She met my eyes, her tone cutting. "A woman who sees an opportunity. My father is vulnerable, Mrs. Johnson. His health is fragile, his judgment clouded. You may think you're being discreet, but believe me, I notice when tuition bills mysteriously vanish and job offers appear out of thin air." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I didn't ask for his help, but you accepted it," she snapped. "That's how it starts. A favor here, a little support there. And before long, women like you are sitting at the family table, smiling politely as you reach for what doesn't belong to you." Her words burned hotter than I expected. I wanted to scream that I had worked every night for 2 decades, that my sacrifices had carved valleys into my face, that I hadn't had the luxury of looking for anyone's fortune but my own children's survival. Instead, I said quietly, "I don't want his money." Samantha tilted her head. "Studying me? You may even believe that, but I've seen this story before. You'll drain him with your sad widow act, and when he's gone, you'll walk away with half of what my mother built alongside him. I won't let that happen." I stiffened. "You have no right to talk to me that way." "And you," she said coldly, slipping her gloves back on, "have no right to be anywhere near my father." She turned and walked away, her heels striking the hallway tile like gavel blows. I stood frozen in the doorway long after she disappeared. Ethan appeared from the kitchen, brows furrowed. "Who was that?" I forced a smile, though my hands trembled. No one important. But inside, I knew it was the beginning of something dangerous. Old wounds, the kind carried by children guarding their father's legacy, had a way of cutting open new shadows. That night, as I sat by the window watching the city lights blink in the distance, I wondered whether kindness always came with a price, and whether the hand that had pulled me out of the rain might also be the hand that pulled me into a storm far greater than the one I had escaped. I didn't tell them about Samantha that night. I couldn't bear to bring her venom into the kitchen where Kayla was humming over her textbooks and Ethan was pretending not to be brooding on the couch. But secrets are heavy things. They sit on your chest until even your children feel the weight. It happened 2 evenings later over the dinner table. Spaghetti again, cheap, filling, something I could stretch across 2 days. Kayla was chattering about a project she was working on, her hands waving in excitement when Ethan dropped his fork with a clatter. "Enough," he said flatly. Kayla blinked. "Enough what?" He turned to me, his jaw tight. "You think I don't notice, Mom? The tuition, the new job, things just falling into place out of nowhere. You think I'm stupid?" My stomach sank. "Ethan, no, tell me the truth. Who's helping us? Who's paying for this? Because it sure as hell isn't us." Kayla's face paled. "What are you talking about?" He shot her a look. "Don't play dumb. Your tuition didn't magically pay itself. Somebody's behind it, and I want to know who." The silence stretched. I set down my fork carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "His name is Richard Coleman. He's a man I met a few weeks ago. He's been kind enough to help." Ethan pushed back from the table so hard the chair scraped against the floor. "I knew it. Some rich guy swooping in, throwing money around, and you just let him." "Ethan," I began, "he isn't what? Isn't buying his way into our lives? Isn't looking at you like some project?" His voice cracked, rising with each word. "Mom, don't you get it? That's pity. That's not respect. That's not love, and it makes us look pathetic." Kayla jumped to her feet, eyes blazing. "Don't talk to her like that. He's helping. Do you even hear yourself? Mom has been breaking her back for us since Dad died, and the first time someone actually helps, you throw it in her face?" "This isn't help," Ethan spat. "This is dependency. This is selling our dignity for a tuition bill and a hospital badge." My chest ached. "That's not fair." He slammed his fist against the table. "Life isn't fair, Mom. You taught me that. You taught me to work hard, to stand on my own. And now what? We're supposed to let some rich stranger fix our lives? That's not strength. That's weakness." Kayla's voice shook. "You're just jealous. Because he did more for us in a month than you've done in a year." The words cut him deep. I saw it in his eyes, the way they flinched like an open wound. He stood abruptly, his chair toppling over. "Maybe I am jealous," he snapped. "Because I'm the son. I'm supposed to take care of you, not some man who doesn't even know our names." The room trembled with his anger, with my silence, with Kayla's tears. He grabbed his coat and stormed out again, the door slamming so hard a picture frame rattled off the wall. Kayla collapsed back into her chair, her face in her hands. "Why does he have to be like this? Why does he always twist everything?" I reached for her hand, my own trembling. "Because he's scared, because he feels like he's failing us, and when men feel small, they lash out." She wiped her tears, looking at me. "But you don't think it's wrong, right? To accept Richard's help?" I hesitated, staring at the spaghetti cooling on our plates. Was it wrong? To let someone stitch patches into the fabric of a life I'd been mending alone for decades? Or was it finally mercy after years of storms? I squeezed her hand. "I don't know what it is yet, but I know this. Whatever happens, I will not let us fall apart. Not over pride, not over help, not over anything." But as I sat there in the flickering kitchen light, listening to the echo of Ethan's anger still hanging in the air, I feared that the cracks had already widened too far. And I couldn't shake Samantha's words, words that clung like smoke. I was in the middle of a fire, and it was only beginning to spread. When storms rage inside your home, it is strange how the world outside keeps moving as if nothing has changed. Buses still groan along the avenue, children still play hopscotch in the alley, church bells still toll at noon. Yet inside our little apartment, the air was heavy, brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest word. Ethan avoided me for days after that fight. He came and went like a ghost, leaving dirty dishes behind but no trace of conversation. Kayla tried to smooth things over cooking pancakes on Saturday mornings, inviting me to watch silly shows with her, but even she carried the tightness of someone trying too hard. It was during that uneasy silence that Richard called again. His voice was weaker this time, threaded with a tiredness I hadn't heard before. "Monica," he said, after a pause long enough to worry me, "I've been meaning to see you. Could you come by my house?" I hesitated. His house. The words alone sounded like trespassing, but something in his voice pulled me there anyway. The Coleman estate was a world apart from ours. Set back from the street behind iron gates, with a driveway lined by oaks that had probably been planted before I was born, the place looked like it had never known struggle. When the maid led me into the study, I felt like an intruder. My thrift store coat dripping rainwater onto rugs that probably cost more than my car. Richard sat in a leather chair, a blanket over his knees, papers scattered on the desk before him. His face looked thinner, his eyes tired but warm when they met mine. "Thank you for coming," he said. I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly. "Are you all right?" He gave a faint smile. "I'm still here, but the doctors say I need to think about the future, and that means getting my affairs in order." My stomach dropped. I shook my head. "Richard, please," he interrupted gently. "Let me say this. You came into my life when I thought I had nothing left to look forward to. You reminded me that people can still care without agenda. And because of that, I want to make sure you and your children are safe." I stared at him, stunned. He tapped the stack of papers. "I've spoken with my lawyer. I intend to leave a portion of my estate to you and your family. Not the company shares, not the houses my daughter clings to, but something. Enough to ease the burden you've carried alone for too long." I felt heat rising to my face. "No, Richard, no, that's not." He raised a trembling hand. "It's not charity, it's gratitude, it's my choice." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words tangled. For years I had begged the heavens for relief, for a break in the clouds. Now it was being offered to me, unasked, and all I could think about was how many people would see it as greed. And as if conjured by that thought, the storm found me before I even left the estate. Samantha was waiting in the foyer, her arms folded, her eyes sharp as knives. "You've been busy," she said coolly. "Private meetings, papers spread out on Father's desk, how convenient." I stiffened. "It wasn't what you think." "Oh, I know exactly what it was," she hissed. "You're working your way into his will. You've barely known him a month, and already you're rewriting the family legacy." Her words cut deep, not because they were true, but because I knew how easily they could sound true to the world outside. "Believe what you want," I said quietly. I didn't ask for any of this, but she was already pulling out her phone, her voice rising. "Everyone will know what you're doing. My friends, our community, the board members. They'll all hear about the widow who sunk her claws into a dying man." I walked past her without another word, my cheeks burning. Outside, the sky was heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of another storm. By the time I reached home, my phone was buzzing with messages. Neighbors, colleagues, even women from church, subtle comments, not outright accusations, but each one laced with suspicion. "I heard you've been keeping wealthy company. Is it true you found someone to take care of things? Good for you if you can get it." Each message was a stone thrown at my windows, chipping away at the fragile walls I had built. Ethan glanced up from the couch as I set my phone down, his expression hard. "So it's true," he said. I froze. "What's true?" "That some old rich guy wants to make you his next project. That people are already talking about it. Mom, do you have any idea what this looks like?" I wanted to scream that it wasn't like that kindness didn't always come with strings, that maybe miracles really did exist in the form of tired old men who owed you nothing. But the words stuck in my throat, because I could still hear Samantha's voice, cold and triumphant. You're working your way into his will. And I couldn't help wondering if, in some way, the whole world had already decided she was right. Rumors move faster than truth. By the next week, I couldn't walk into the grocery store without feeling the weight of whispers pressing on my back. A woman I'd sung hymns beside in church lowered her eyes instead of meeting mine. Another leaned into her friend's ear, her glance slicing in my direction like a blade. I tried to ignore it, to hold my head high as I had done through lean years and long nights. But shame is a stubborn stain. It seeps into the skin even when you know you're clean. That Friday, I came home to find Ethan waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, jaw set. "Mom," he said, "you need to stop seeing that man." I dropped my purse on the counter, weary from another 12-hour shift. "Ethan? No, listen to me. People are talking. They're saying you're after his money, that you're taking advantage of him." His words cracked something inside me. "Do you think that?" I asked quietly. He looked away. I don't know what to think anymore. Before I could answer, Kayla stormed in, her backpack slipping off one shoulder. "This is ridiculous. Mom saved that man's life. He helped her back. End of story. Why are we letting gossip dictate what we believe?" "Because gossip becomes truth when enough people repeat it," Ethan snapped. "And I'm not going to sit here and watch Mom get destroyed by this." Their voices clashed like thunder in my tiny kitchen, both fighting for me in their own way, both wounding me without meaning to. I finally raised my hands. "Enough, both of you. I can't fight this battle and the two of you at the same time." That night, after they had retreated to their rooms, one fuming, the other in tears, I sat at the kitchen table alone. Bills spread before me, phone buzzing with another half-hidden message: "Be careful who you get involved with." I couldn't do this alone anymore. The next morning, I called a name I hadn't spoken in years. Angela Parker. Her voice on the other end was warm, surprised. "Monica? Well, it's been forever. How are you?" I hesitated. "Not good, and I think I need your help." Angela and I had met decades ago in nursing school before she'd changed course, becoming a lawyer instead. She'd always had a fire in her belly, the kind that wouldn't let injustice stand unchallenged. That afternoon, I sat in her office downtown. Glass windows framed the city skyline, but inside, it was just the two of us, two women carrying years of different battles. She listened as I poured it all out. The rainy night, Richard's kindness, Samantha's accusations, the whispers spreading through town, the fracture at my own dinner table. Angela leaned back, fingers steepled. "You know what this is? It's control. People see a strong woman finally catching a break and it rattles them. They can't imagine you've earned it, so they rewrite the story into one that makes sense to them, widow chasing wealth." I rubbed my temples. And what do? Let them talk? Let Samantha paint me as some gold digger? "No," Angela said firmly. "You gather your proof, you protect your rights, and you keep your dignity. That means documents, Monica, evidence. If Richard wants to leave you anything, make sure it's done cleanly, legally, transparently. And if Samantha wants to smear your name, she'll be standing on quicksand." I exhaled shakily. "I'm so tired, Angela. I've been tired for 20 years. Her gaze softened. "Then let someone else carry part of the weight, but don't confuse needing help with being helpless. You are not helpless." The words struck something deep. I had spent so many years measuring my worth by how much I could endure alone. To be told that accepting help wasn't weakness, it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. When I left her office, she pressed a card into my hand. "Call me anytime, and Monica, don't let them shame you for surviving." I walked out into the late afternoon light, the city buzzing around me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stirring in my chest that wasn't fear or shame, it was resolve. I had been silent when Carlton fired me. Silent when Ethan accused me. Silent when Samantha slung her venom, but silence had never saved anyone. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to learn how to stand. When people want to ruin you, they rarely do it in private. They choose a stage, the bigger the better, and they make sure every eye is watching when they cast the first stone. For Samantha, that stage was her father's house. The invitation came in the form of a carefully worded text. "Family dinner this Sunday. Father insists. Please attend." There was no question mark, no courtesy. Just a command dressed up in polite words. I almost didn't go. Every instinct told me to stay home, to protect myself and my children from more venom. But Angela's voice echoed in my head, "Don't let them shame you for surviving." So I went. The Coleman dining room was nothing like my little kitchen table, scarred with knife marks and coffee rings. Their table stretched long as a runway, polished to a shine, candles flickering in silver holders. The air smelled of rosemary and money. Richard sat at the head, looking frailer than I'd last seen him, his hands resting on the arms of his chair as if holding himself steady. Samantha stood beside him, radiant in her confidence, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a trap well laid. There were others too, cousins, business partners, family, friends. Strangers to me, but each one clearly briefed, their glances sharp, expectant. When I entered, the room shifted. Conversations hushed. Forks paused midair. Samantha smiled thinly. "Monica," she said, her voice honeyed, "how wonderful you could join us." I forced a polite nod. "Thank you for the invitation." We sat. The meal began, though I could barely taste the food on my plate. Every bite felt like waiting for a verdict. Richard tried to make small talk, but his voice was weak, his cough persistent. Samantha filled the silences, asking after business deals, recounting family memories, all while her eyes flicked toward me like a hawk circling prey. And then she struck. "You know," she said, setting her wine glass down with deliberate care, "we've all been so concerned about Father lately. His health, his decisions." She let her gaze slide toward me. "Especially the new friendships he's made." A murmur rippled down the table. She folded her hands. "I think it's only fair that we address it openly. After all, when a vulnerable man suddenly changes his will, people have questions." All eyes turned to me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I opened my mouth, but Samantha spoke first. "Some of you may not know Monica," she continued sweetly. "She's a nurse, well, was a nurse until she lost her job. A widow struggling with bills, tuition for her daughter, a tragic story, really." Her tone sharpened. "And yet somehow, in just a few short weeks, she's become central to my father's plans. Central enough that certain financial provisions are being considered." Gasps, whispers, the clink of silverware. My cheeks burned. I could have stayed silent. I could have let their judgment drown me, as I had so many times before. But Angela's words pulsed in my veins. "Gather your proof. Protect your dignity," so I stood. "Since we're speaking openly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "let me tell you how I met your father. It was raining. He was alone on a sidewalk, struggling to breathe. I could have kept walking, but I didn't. I stayed. I helped. That's all it was. That's all it ever needed to be." The room quieted. Samantha narrowed her eyes, but I pressed on. "I didn't ask him for favors. I didn't beg him for money. If he chose to help me, it was because kindness still matters to some people. And if that threatens you, perhaps the problem isn't me." A sharp intake of breath from somewhere down the table. Richard lifted his head, his voice hoarse but clear. "She's telling the truth." He looked at his daughter, his eyes filled with both love and disappointment. "Samantha, I asked her here. I made those choices. Monica never asked me for a dime." The room was silent, all eyes swinging between us. Samantha flushed, but her lips tightened into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said coolly, "I suppose everyone can decide for themselves what they believe." But I saw the flicker in her expression, the frustration of a blow that hadn't landed as cleanly as she wanted. As the meal resumed, conversations stilted and forced, I sat back in my chair, my heart still racing. I had not destroyed the storm, but for the first time, I had stood in the middle of it and refused to drown. When the night ended and I walked out into the cool air, Angela's card felt heavy in my pocket. Samantha had shown her hand, and I knew she wouldn't stop. But neither would I. I thought the storm had peaked at that dinner table, but I was wrong. Samantha's smile that night wasn't surrender, it was a warning. She had lost the first round, and I knew she would not forgive me for speaking back. The whispers outside grew sharper in the days that followed. At the hospital, 2 nurses paused their conversation when I entered the break room. At church, someone pressed my hand a little too long, her eyes searching mine as if for confirmation of the rumors. Ethan's silence grew colder, while Kayla tried harder to brighten the room, though even she was wearing thin. And then came the evening Richard insisted on seeing me. It was a small gathering, not the grand stage Samantha preferred. Just Richard, Samantha, myself, and, unexpectedly, Ethan and Kayla. His study felt like a courtroom, papers neatly stacked on the desk, a fire snapping in the hearth. Richard looked older than I had ever seen him, his frame smaller inside the thick sweater he wore. He cleared his throat. "I asked you all here because I'm tired of secrets. I don't have the strength left for games." His voice was weak, but each word landed with weight. Samantha's eyes glinted. "Then perhaps it's time you told us why Monica is suddenly woven into every plan of yours." Richard ignored her and turned to Ethan and Kayla. "Your mother saved my life. You may think I exaggerate, but I don't. That night, on the sidewalk, I was slipping away. If not for her, I might not be here. Everything I've done for her since has been choice, not manipulation. And if gratitude and admiration make me a fool in my daughter's eyes, so be it." Samantha's mouth tightened. "Father," but Richard raised a trembling hand. "Enough. I've built an empire, Samantha. I know when someone is after me for what I have. Monica isn't. I've seen greed, I've lived with it. What she carries isn't greed, it's resilience." The room fell quiet. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the carpet. Kayla reached for my hand under the table. Richard's voice softened. "I want you all to hear this from me. I intend to set aside a portion of my estate, not to enrich Monica, but to ease the burden she has borne alone for too long. The rest remains with this family. That's my decision, and it will not be undone by suspicion or gossip." The fire cracked, punctuating his words. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan's voice broke the silence, low and ragged. "Mom," I turned. His face was pale, his eyes shimmering with tears he had fought too long to hold. "I'm sorry. His voice cracked and he swallowed hard. "I thought you were losing yourself, letting someone else fix everything, but I was wrong. You've been carrying us on your back for years, and all I did was judge you. I'm so sorry." My heart broke open. I reached across and took his hand, squeezing it as the tears finally spilled from his eyes. "Ethan," I whispered, "you've never been a burden. You are my son, that's all you ever needed to be." Kayla pressed against me, her arm wrapping around my shoulder. And for the first time in years, the 3 of us sat joined, not fractured, our tears falling together like rain washing old wounds. Richard leaned back, watching us with a faint, weary smile. "There," he murmured. "That's what matters. Not money, not rumors. Family." Samantha turned away, her lips trembling though she hid it behind her hand. For just a moment, I wondered if she too remembered what it was like to be held by a parent who loved without condition. That night, as I guided my children out into the cool air, Ethan's arm around my shoulders, Kayla's hand gripping mine, I felt something stronger than fear rising inside me. For so long I had fought to survive. But that night, in the glow of Richard's words and my son's tears, I remembered what the heart already knew. Love, real love, was the only legacy worth leaving behind. And no rumor, no accusation, no inheritance could ever change that. Richard passed quietly one autumn morning, the kind of morning when the leaves catch the light just so, making even grief look golden for a moment. When the call came, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee cooling in my hands. I knew before the words were spoken. Sometimes the heart senses when a chapter has ended, even before the page is turned. His funeral was simple, just as he had wished. No grand speeches, no business associates parading their respect. Only family, a few close friends, and the handful of people who had mattered to him in the end. Samantha wept real tears this time. She clung to me after the service, her voice cracking. "I thought I was losing him to you," she whispered. "But now I realize I was losing him to time." I held her, both of us trembling, two women bound not by rivalry, but by the same wound, the ache of a man we had both loved in our own ways. The will was read weeks later. True to his word, Richard left the lion's share of his fortune to his family, his company, and his daughter. To me, he left something else. A small trust fund for Kayla's education, a modest sum to ease my own burdens, and, most important of all, his request that I oversee a charitable foundation in his late wife's name, one dedicated to helping women rebuild after loss. I accepted, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. His last act was not to enrich me, but to trust me with the work of turning pain into hope. Ethan found a steady job soon after, his shoulders lighter, his eyes clearer. He told me one night over dinner, "I want to be the kind of man Dad would have been proud of, the kind of man Richard believed I could be." And for the first time, I believed he would be. Kayla flourished at school, her laughter filling our home again. She spoke of internships, of dreams, of the future in a way that made my heart swell. As for me, I stepped into a new role I had never imagined, director of the foundation. The office was small at first, a few desks, a few volunteers. But every day, women walked through those doors, women who had buried husbands, lost jobs, been written off by the world. And every day I told them what I had learned. Help is not weakness. Survival is not shame. And love, real love, can still be found even in the ruins. Sometimes, late at night, I sit by the window with a cup of tea and think of Richard. I imagine him smiling that tired, gentle smile, his hand resting over his heart. I whisper my thanks into the quiet, knowing somehow he hears. I am not rich by the world's measure, but I am free, I am strong, and I am surrounded by a family that, though cracked and scarred, has been mended by love. This, I realize, is the true inheritance. Not money, not property, but the courage to keep living when life tries to break you. And so my story ends where every story of survival begins, with a new beginning. To everyone who has listened to my story, thank you. Life can be heavy, but stories remind us that we are never truly alone in our struggles. I wish you health, strength, and the blessing of a family that holds together through every storm. May your days be filled with peace and your homes with love. With gratitude, Monica.